So we got Figma open. Got Figma open already?
Yeah.
Cool. And so this workshop was supposed to be all about prototyping and then the development side with that Figma dev mode. But as I believe I mentioned last week, they put it out of beta and now it's on a paid plan, which we don't get access to, which kind of sucks. No, it's like similar to how in the first workshop I explained how like even though we're on the pro one with education stuff, we still can't do videos. And it's the same thing, unfortunately. So can't show that off. Might be a quick workshop today then. But I'll show like two different kind of like development related things that you can do in Figma. They're not as fun, but they are options. So the first thing is that we are going to prototype something, but I want to make sure that we have enough screens to prototype with so that it's not just those kind of boring things that we were making before where we only have like one screen and don't have anything else. And so how we're going to do that is using the community. So down in this bottom left, there's Explore Community. You can also find it if you click your name, and then there'll be Community Profile. And so I'm going to go there. And this is essentially a place for people and companies to put free and paid stuff that you are allowed to use in your designs. So just scrolling through, you can see that there's a bunch of different things that you can remix and make your own. If they're paid, they'll have how much it costs in the top left of the thumbnail. But if I were to find one that I like, let's see real quick. Maybe this one stands out. There's some graphs. Maybe I don't want to do the whole thing of building each graph by itself. So when you double click in there, you'll get to its little page. And if you want to use it, all you have to do is click this Open in Figma button, and that will create a copy of it in your own Figma that you can feel free to use to play around with and change things around. In terms of copyright stuff, there's usually this license under section, and you can always click on that link and then see what you can do. This CC by 4 is you can even use it commercially. You can play around with it, publish it. It's just you have to attribute it to this person and then say if any changes were made, essentially. So we're going to use one from the Figma workshop series that I did last year. So if you search in the community for DL Figma workshop, we have this one that I published. It was DL Figma workshop, and you can just click open in Figma to create a copy of it. And then you'll know that it's from the community because the title will say community in there. We got that? Awesome. So yeah, we can play around with this one. Last year we did a mobile app for a coffee shop, essentially. And you'll notice, as I was saying in the previous ones, I love these styles. I have so many of them set up. Over here, I have a bunch of pages. This first one's the wireframe we did in the first workshop, the mock-up screens that we did in the second one. Under prototype, this is where we're going to do all of our fun stuff today. Under assets, this is where I built all of my components and the variants that we talked about last week. I just like making them on their own separate page. And you'll notice that I made one, like the basic ones that have different states for like what type of entry data is it, and then if it's filled or not. And so these can be really fun to make. It might be a little tedious at times, but having all these ready to go makes making the mockups and the prototypes a lot easier. Then I also do have the extra learning resources right here. This is basically like if you want to learn more about UX design, Figma, or just design in general, I put some recommended stuff right there. So now we're back in the prototype page. Let's go there. And this is where we're going to start doing stuff with the prototypes. So most of that is going to be done on this prototype tab over here. If you have nothing selected in your canvas, so right now I don't have any frame, no button, no image selected, you get these options. I believe we went through these already, but just as a reminder, you can change what device you want to see the prototype in. You can change its orientation. For iPhones and other things. You can change what type of device it is. I find that still kind of funny. And then this background color is going to be the color that's behind your prototype when people view it. So you can play around with what looks best. Cool. So now let's start doing stuff with actual prototyping. So if you click on this loading signed out DL user, you'll notice that my options in prototype tab change. So the first thing I want to do is with this flow starting point, and I'm going to click the plus button. And what a flow essentially is a representation of the workflow that a user would do in your app. So this one might be a new user sign up process flow. So let's name it that, new user sign up. And then this lets me know that in this flow, I'm going to be prototyping how this new user is going to be signing up for their account on this app. Yeah, if you select the frame, and then there'll be flow starting point, and there'll be a plus button by it. Yeah, and you can have multiple flows throughout your entire prototype. I try to break them up a little bit by like different chunks so that like if you go and like hand them off to a developer or you're starting to do the development stuff, that they can also break it up of like, hey, this is the workflow. Let's make sure this is all working and testing and stuff like that. So what's nice is now that you can have this flow starting point, if you hover over the sides of the frame, you'll notice these circles that show at the top, bottom, left, and right. And when you go over that, it shows a plus. And this is how you create a connection or how you can connect these frames together. So in my workflow, this is going to be my loading screen. And then after it's loaded, it's going to go into my login page. So I'm going to click on the right side of this and just drag it to my next frame. And you can see that it highlights when I've done that. And when I release, I get the pop-up that configures how we want to have this prototype interaction. So right here, it's on tap. So this is going to be if you click on it, if you tap on your app or something like that. If you click there, there's all of these other options. So we're going to go through a couple of these through this workshop. This first one we're going to do is after delay right here. So this is going to simulate that there is this loading delay. I'm going to crank this up quite a bit so that we can see it. It's based on milliseconds, but let's say I want to make it 5 seconds. I can do 5s. And this configures how long of a delay that we have there. This could also be if you want to have like images in a gallery that change and you want it to change after a certain amount of time. You can also do that with this after delay. Then here's the behavior. So this is what it's actually going to do after our delay. This navigate to is going to be your best friend. Most people use it all the time for everything, including this one, but we'll go through some of the other ones later too. So we'll keep it to navigate to. And because I clicked and dragged this connection, it already knows that I want account access as the frame that I'm going to. But you can also change it here as well. Where it says instant is where we can configure some animation stuff. So I'm going to leave it at instant so I can show you what that looks like. So I'm going to click X, going to highlight my frame again, and I'm going to go and click play. It's going to load. There's a lot of screens and images, so it might take a little bit. So I can see my delay, and then boom, it just instantly goes. Not what I probably want with this. It's not super clean. So let's change that. So if you already have made your connection, when you go back and edit it, you just got to click on it. So let's change instant to smart animate. This is going to be a really fun one to play with because what it does is it takes your original frame and compares it to this destination frame, and then it's going to determine what's different. So in this one, this logo is placed up a little bit more, and we have these buttons added. So instead of it just being some standard animation, it's saying, hey, I know that these things are different. Let me kind of animate between them in a way that looks really nice. So now we can configure some of the animation properties. So right here where it says ease out, this essentially means that it is like slower at the beginning as it's going out of the start, and then it kind of speeds up to the rest. These ease ones are pretty standard. You can do a custom Bezier if you know how to use Bezier curves and want to really customize what you want to do. But let's just do ease in and out. This just makes it, and you can see the little preview. It might be a little glitchy, I think, because I'm sharing my screen. But it should go pretty slow at the beginning, kind of speed up a little bit, and then slow back in so that it's a smoother transition. And that time frame you can also change right here. So it's 300 milliseconds. Maybe I want to crank it up a little bit just for demonstration purposes, but it kind of looks nice at times to see. So I went to 3 seconds or 3000 milliseconds. And let's see what that looks like. So we have our delay, and then now looks a lot better. Cool. So now let's do these buttons. Even though this is a mobile app, I'm going to prototype this as if it was a website. So if you hover over things on a website, it's going to show you that it's clickable in some way, shape, or form. If you go to my assets and we find those buttons, I've put one that's the default, one that's when it's hovered, and one that when you're clicking down on it. And so let's prototype that. So if you click on the login button and then up here by interactions, you just click the plus button, and then we can do it right over here. So instead of on tap, we're going to change it to while hovering. And then where it says none, we're going to change it to change to. And you'll notice that it puts up use and state. And that's when I configured all of my components and my variants. This is what I did. So last week when we were doing like, hey, this is our one that's not hovered, this is the one that is hovered. This is where you can play around with the prototyping with those variants, which is really nice. So all I have to do is change state to hover. And then this is where you can play around with the behavior there. I think instant just makes the most sense in this case. Cool. So let's do that for the other two buttons as well. So you just click on the button, click on the plus by interactions, change it to while hovering, change the behavior to change to, and you set it to hover. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to show you what this looks like. But if you ever want to play around with viewing this, but you don't want to have to go all the way back to the start of your flow as we start to build out more of this network, all you have to do is click the frame title that you want to start from, and then click the plus button or the play button, and it will start you from that screen instead. And so now in my prototype, I can hover over and it changes to that other design that I made. Cool. So let's keep it moving. So now we're gonna do the overlay. I'm gonna usually just start with one example. So we're just gonna do the login one. And then if you wanna play around and do the register one or the continue as guest later, you can do that. So I'm gonna click on login and I'm gonna click and drag my connection to my login overlay. So right now, it's going to be when we tap it, it is going to navigate to our overlay screen. But I want to show you why we need to make some edits, because that screen is a different size because it's just supposed to be an overlay. And if I click on it, it does this really funny thing. I think Smart Animate might be. So let's click on that connection again. Instead of, we'll keep on tap. Instead of navigate to, we go to open overlay. And these are our overlay settings. So you can choose which frame is the overlay. You can change what the behavior is. So if you want it to be instant, so it just shows up. If you want it to kind of dissolve in, if you want it to move in such a way. So if I click move in, I get these arrow directions. So maybe when I click login, I want it to come from the bottom, let's say. It just comes up through the bottom. You can do that here. And then same kind of things with our animation. You can do ease in, ease out, gentle, quick. I'll show you bouncy this time, which is one of their presets. And then we have some additional overlay settings. So one is centered. So this is going to be if we want our overlay to appear right in the center of stuff. But you can also move it to a different area of the screen. So you can do top left, top center, top right, all of these options. If you click manual, it's going to show you the overlay over your frame, and you'll have to just move it to where you want it to be if you want something custom. But I think centered is pretty fine for what we're doing. Then this close when clicking outside. So we do have this button that we made to close it, but also sometimes you'll want people to, if they're used to clicking outside of your overlay to get rid of stuff, you can simulate that here by just making this selected. And then this add background button allows you to add something between the overlay and then that original frame. So our overlay is going to be on top of our account access. And by default, it's going to apply like a 25% transparent black thing. So it just looks darker in the back, which is pretty standard. So let's do that. And let's see how that looks. Okay, so when I click login, that was that bouncy animation. And you can do it as many times as you want. You don't have to reset the prototype each time. Cool. So let's do the rest of this overlay. So we're going to simulate this X button also being able to close it. We'll simulate putting in an email and a password, and then also the submit to send us to our homepage. So I'm going to click on my X button, click on the plus by interactions in the prototype tab, on tap, and then we'll change it to close overlay. And so this way, if we click on that X button, it'll also close the overlay and you don't have to click outside of the overlay. There's also that swap overlay one. So if, let's say we wanted to simulate having a login overlay, we have our register one. And let's say I wanted to put that like no account, register one now kind of call out that most things have, I can put that right here and then have that prototype to be when you click on it, it'll swap it to here. So now let's click on the enter your email field, click on plus by interactions. This one's a little interesting. You can't, from what I know, simulate it where the person could put in their own information. So I normally just leave it as like a variant. So it's on tap, change to, and then I'll change it to filled. And let's do that same thing with our password. So we're going to add on tap. We'll change it to filled and we can keep it instant. And then on our submit button, let's click that. And then we can click and drag to our home screen. And then let's do on tap, navigate to, let's do something else that's a little fun. Let's try, I'll show you what dissolve looks like. And I'll change it to gentle. And we'll crank this up also to 3 seconds, just so we can see what these all look like. Generally, like you don't want to prototype too much that your app is going to take so long to load and do these things. I'm just doing them for visualization purposes. So now if we click on account access, we can click the play button. Cool. So now when I hover over any of these, they show me that they are clickable. I can click on login. My pop-up bounces up. I can also click on this X button to get rid of it. If I click in the enter your email, it'll fill out the email that I put in. And I can also do a password. And then you can click submit. And it will, in our case, gently dissolve into our homepage. So now let's do this. So components also make it pretty easy to prototype things, as we have this menu down here that is across every one of our screens, except the overlays. So these are all made with one component, and then they have their variants and stuff. However, it is located on my assets tab. And while I said, hey, I really like doing this because it separates things out, I can see everything together, it does make prototyping a little weird. Yeah, it should be in your right click menu. Oh, it shows up here for me. So on the layers, I found it. And then if you go to move to page, and then we'll do prototype. So we'll take it off of our assets page and move it to our prototype page, probably in some location that isn't really helpful. So if we move this to the side over here, because this is not in a frame and we're not prototyping to it, a user is not going to accidentally stumble upon this like little component group and they're like, what's going on here? But what's really nice is because this is our main component, right? So we have our nav menu, this is our main component. If we go to this base one and you double click in there till you get to this rectangle icon and you go to interactions and you click plus on tap, navigate to, and this is our home. So we'll want to find our home page. Let's do homepage DL user. We'll just do instant for now. You'll notice if you click into any of the other instances throughout the page, that homepage button is also prototyped to that homepage. So when you have your parent component located on the same page that you're prototyping, you can prototype from the parent component, and all of the instances that you have across your designs will also have that prototype interaction. It's a lot easier than going into each one individually and trying to click and drag and find it. Cool. Any questions about that? Yes. So so right now it's only on this one, and all of these here are different, what's it called? Instances of it. So if I were to prototype something where, like, let's say someone adds this cold brew to their cart and it goes back to this menu screen and then it simulates the, like, something's new in the cart, I don't believe you'd be able to actually click that and go back there. So it is something that you have to do for each one, but when you start doing more complex prototyping, it is a little bit easier than making so many different screens and doing each thing individually. Cool. So on drag, we can just go through these ones. On drag is if you drag something. So this would be like if you're gonna prototype like a slider or something. We did while hovering, while pressing is if you're holding something down on it. Key or gamepad, I believe, is like if you were to like click a button on like the keyboard, or like if you're using like an Xbox controller, if you're prototyping a game. I haven't played around with it too much, but I guess you could determine what it is. Cool. A mouse enter, mouse leave is like if the mouse that the person's using goes into that area or leaves it. Touch up or touch down, I believe if they touch like right above or right below. Haven't also played with that one too much.
It's kind of like figure,
Achieve the what?
like when you click on the right.
Oh yeah. So let's go back to this one, our account access screen. We can do it with our register. So you can also click on the plus button here to create a new interaction, and then it'll be while pressing. You'll notice that you can't do the same one twice, and then we'll do change to, and then it's our clicked one. So now if we do that, I'm a little finicky. Okay, so that's what happened. It was that one does it where like if you click it and then it's going back. Okay, let's figure this one out because that is different from what I remember. It might be touchdown that we want to do. Oh, it's still doing the same thing. Okay, let's try it and then also add. Being a little weird. Yeah, so when you have multiple of these, find this cursor and just click and drag to prioritize which ones. Almost like layers, like over here. All right. The next one that I want to show is if you go over to this menu. So because I was prototyping a mobile app and I had multiple different hot drinks and cold drinks and food available, I couldn't fit them all on one screen, unless if I was going to go and do it like where it's all on one screen, but that might be kind of annoying to go through. So design wise, I have this as the auto layout. It's going horizontal, and then I have it where it's on the frame over here. So because it's in the menu frame, any content that's outside of that frame's width is not going to show on our screen. But I maybe want to prototype that you can go kind of back and forth to show that you can do that. So with that element selected, if you click on prototype, there is this overflow for scroll behavior. And you can go horizontal. And then when you look at that, you're able to click and drag to move it over. And then there's also the scroll behavior. So right now the position is scroll with parent, which is going to be the frame. But we can change it to fixed if we want it to do more of I thought it would do what I wanted it to. Let's try it like this. Oh, I guess you can also click and drag if you do both directions to do something really funny. So right now we have our hot drinks group in a auto layout frame. And so it spans the width of this whole section. So even though we don't see all of it, it's still considered within this frame. So what you want to do is click on this click contents section in the design tab, and then you can change how wide this frame is. So I'm going to go and just show you, like, if you keep going like this, it's going to clip what is shown within it. And let's do it where it's flush with our screen. So how I did that is, like, I'll do it with cold drinks here. You click clip content in the design tab, and then you just click and drag the frame to resize it. And then you go to the prototype tab, overflow, you do horizontal. And then now it should work. So now you're scrolling through the content within that frame. So for the rest of these screens, it's all the prototyping is stuff that we've done already. So these other ones you can prototype using the interactions, changing the variants to the ones that are filled out, the menus to more of the screens. For something like, hey, I want to add this to my cart, we would maybe have it where if you click on the cold brew, it would open the overlay on tap. All of this is fine. And then maybe with add to cart, we would do another screen for menu. Like we would duplicate this. I'm holding down option and I'm dragging this down. And then we can click here in this new menu frame where there's the navigation menu at the bottom, and we can change it to items in cart 1, let's say. And then we can prototype this overlay so that when you do add to cart, you navigate to this new menu one. So what that would look like now is I have my original menu screen. I used cold brew to, when you click on it, this overlay shows up. I'm going to click add to cart, and now it's going to send me to that new frame that I created that has it where there's one thing in my cart. Now you might be thinking, okay, if I wanted to fully simulate this app where people can add everything to their cart, they can remove things, change things around, doing all that prototyping between things is a little annoying. The prototype is not meant to have every feature in your app or your website able to be working. So the goal of this prototype is to get feedback on stuff. So I would probably right now, I would fill out more, but I could put this part of the prototype in like a user research study. So I could invite people in and say, hey, I want you to log in as a user. And then I can see them watching how to do that and make sure that they know and things make sense like that. So your prototype, you don't need to go through and think of every case that may happen. Most of this is going to be for getting feedback before things are fully developed. And so you don't need to do everything. So the first development tool that we have is very basic and is only in the case of if you are working with a separate developer. So if I'm the designer for this app, I'm not the one developing it. There's someone who's much better at coding than I am, let's say. And they're using the same Figma file, let's say. They're going to go through in here. Maybe they get access to dev mode and we don't. And we want them to know, like, hey, some of this other pieces of the design might still be worked on, but at least this first, let's say, 4 screens, those are ready to be developed. You can start working on coding those out. So if you click on the frame, this button right here on the right is just marking it as ready for development. And it has this little icon here that shows that it's able to be developed. It'll also show a little icon by the page that there's something on the page that is marked as ready for development. If you click on that little thing and you do have access to dev mode, you can open it up In dev mode specifically, I got a little preview of it. In dev mode, you get to see like the code that can build it out and some samples. You can see the box model where it's like this is how much the content takes up and the padding and the borders and the margins, which is really nice when you have access to it. So that's number one, really basic, mostly just for collaboration. And then the other one is through the use of plugins that we know and love. So if you click on the Figma icon and you go to plugins and manage plugins, again, these are going to be our additional features that you can install. So it's Figma icon, plugins, manage plugins. You can also right click on your canvas and do plugins. For some reason, mine's not working. But here you can search for all these different plugins. The first one is if I were to just search up like HTML, let's say, I can see a couple different ones. Figma to HTML, React View, Figma to Code. This one's Figma to Code, Figma to HTML. So some of this is just playing around with these plugins and seeing which ones work and which ones don't. Usually the ones that are used by a lot of people are pretty good. And then the other one actually also showed up right here, and that's Figma to Webflow that I wanted to show. This one will send your Figma design to Webflow, which is a content management system like WordPress or Wix or Squarespace, and it'll put your design there that you can publish if you have like a Webflow account set up. It's not 100% perfect. You might have to make some edits within Webflow to make it exactly how you want it to be. But these plugins can really help when you want to actually put some of the designs that you're making into code so that you can develop it. Cool. And yeah, we went through the prototyping. We went through the limited development options that we were given now that dev mode is no longer available to us.